It is my honor and privilege to introduce you to Rachel Kelly, featured in Forbes, CBC, Girl Boss, and more. She's a repeat entrepreneur, a true dynamic leader, but above all of this, she is a vibrant soul behind the blooming magic, community building, florist in the heart of Toronto, Canada. Today, I'm so glad to interview you, Rachel. You have been an inspiration to me for years. With every conversation we've had, you left me with feeling so energized, and it always feels like talking to a mentor. The way you lead, pivot, create a successful community where it feels like a safe space to talk about failure, success, and collaboration. I truly believe that this is all where the change starts. I'm so excited to talk to you about the entrepreneurship and how you have transitioned and pivot from your co-working community to become a florist, become a leader. But before we start talking about Make Lemonade, which by the way, I'm so excited to unpack and have authentic and organic conversations with you. Before we jump in, I want to ask you, who is Rachel Kelly and what's her story?
Oh my gosh, Malika, what a nice introduction. So lovely. Well, I feel very honored to be chatting with you today. To answer the question, who's Rachel Kelly? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm an optimist at heart, and I'm very inspired by color and driven by the desire to live a happy and colorful life. And although I feel like, following that passion, life can lead me on some very challenging and lesson learning endeavors. But then at the end of the day, like, my priority is like my happiness and my well-being. So that's like the very general me in a nutshell.
No, and your brand truly reflects it. I feel like even though you have transitioned working community to like florist, like you still like stayed true to yourself. And like it's still, doesn't feel like that change, even though like the business models have changed completely. But you have been authentic to yourself. So I've been following your journey for so long, and I'm completely enthralled with your entrepreneur journey. So can you give a little bit of snippet further to someone who's, meeting you? Like, how did you transition from Make Lemonade, creating a beautiful co-working community, to shifting it online during pandemic and then starting a whole new venture in floristry?
Yeah. So the root of like how I started my business called Make Lemonade is because in 2016, life had handed me a lemon. I had a job opportunity that went sour, and I spent a little bit of time kind of being bitter about the situation. And then I realized, I was like, I've always wanted to start my own business. I've been sitting on this idea of creating some sort of shared collaborative space for a while. Why not go after it? So I spent about a year researching, looking for a space in Toronto. And, right now, as I'm talking about it, that's quite a generous summary of what happened in that year. But then I ended up opening the doors to the co-working space right downtown Toronto. The key for me was to make sure that my co-working space was different than others. And there weren't really many co-working spaces that were specific for women in Toronto or the GTA. And so that's why I decided to give it a little bit of an extra spin, make something different, and have it as a space for women. And everything was going really well. And then 2020 happened. And I have to say, in January and February of 2020, that's when I was like looking around the space. I was looking at our profit and loss statement and being like, okay, I've finally made it. Like, this is what I was envisioning. I've reached success. And then a month or two later, the pandemic happened, and it was like, okay, I quickly have to switch gears in order to keep this business alive. I have a lease. I have a 5-year lease. I'm less than halfway through it. What am I going to do? And so then that's when virtual co-working became a thing. And that's, I think, around the time when I met you, Malika. And it was just a way to keep our community connected. It kind of was twofold, like keep our community connected find a way to make any money to keep the lights on. And really that's where like I think what evolved in that period of time was being able to listen and support entrepreneurs on maybe more of like an emotional level, especially in those first couple of months when everything was like so isolated and we just really didn't know what was going on. And then about a year later, I think it was when I made the decision, or I was looking at our numbers and going, I can't keep doing this. Like the pandemic is not ending. I'm like hemorrhaging money to keep the space open. And yet the majority of my members are joining us online. And so then that was that transition. It was, you know, on paper, it was like, yes, it was the smart decision. Emotionally, it was hard to kind of go, okay, this was the idea. This is what it was supposed to be. Now I have to go with plan B. And that took several months to actually go from, okay, I'm going to close the space because I had a 5-year lease. I couldn't just get rid of the lease. I had to find a subtenant. And that took almost 10 months to find a subtenant. And I was doing this kind of all behind the scenes while nobody in the community knew what was going on. And once I found that subtenant, things moved pretty quickly. I made the announcement, and like within like less than 60 days, the space was closed and business was full-time online. And I thought to myself, okay, great. Life is going to be easier. I'm going to just get to work from a laptop, and I'm going to like, my community is here. It's just going to be me at home, and like, it's going to be great. And then what happened is I started to feel this like feeling of like, this isn't enough. And I felt really guilty about it because of like the amazing community that I had built online, and because of the amazing connections and the online portion, like it was working really well. But there was something deep down that was like, this isn't it. This isn't the full thing. And I realized I was feeling similar feelings I had back in 2016 when I wanted to open the co-working space. And it was this feeling of loneliness and isolation. And even though I had a community online, I was like, I want something more. And during that time when in 2016, you know, when I was renovating the space and getting it open, I got to use a lot of my creativity. You know, one thing that we haven't really talked about, but is like the space was like very visually beautiful. I got to like play with interior design and just like create something out of my imagination. So flash forward to 2021, when I've closed the space and I'm doing just the online version of things. I took a floristry class just for fun, and I really liked it. I read an article in Toronto Life about a woman leaving her job in corporate banking to become a florist, and I couldn't get this idea out of my mind. So I took another workshop. I really liked that too. And then I ended up going to floristry school. It was a 20-hour program, and it was over 4 Saturdays in a month. And I figured, you know, the worst thing that can happen is that I learn a little bit more about flowers. I ended up loving it so much. I told my community, this is what I think I'm going to do. And then I started booking weddings for my members. And it was like this amazing example of like, when I put myself out there and I'm really honest, like people are going to believe in me. And it was just this incredible ripple effect. And then flash forward a couple months later, I was like, I think I have to do this full time. And now here we are.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
We used to say, like, when life gives you lemon, just gotta make a lemonade out of it.
Yeah.
And as a business owners, like, we become so attached to our businesses, like it's our baby, right? So the fact that like you could kind of pivot from it and like see, okay, how can I stay relevant? Like what's next? Like, you know, you were very proactive, and I think that's a really good lesson for upcoming entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, I think that was like a big thing, especially when the pandemic hit, is we asked the question, and I keep saying we is because I had an amazing team member at the time who you knew, Ashley, and it was amazing to have somebody else, you know, who I could brainstorm ideas with. And we were asking the question, okay, what do people need right now? And more importantly, what does our community need right now? What are they feeling? And it was like, well, we're at home, we're lonely, but we still have businesses to run. Like, we still need to do it. And so that was like, how are we going to solve for this problem?
What were some of the challenges, like, you know, you face, and like, how did you navigate it?
Was financial challenge of having this 3,000 square foot space, and rent was very expensive. And the biggest challenge was like trying to keep the lights on when people weren't allowed to leave their homes, or, you know, we were highly recommended to stay at home. And then I think like throughout the course of since inception of Make Lemonade has always been trying to, I think I've always had this tug and pull of like trying to separate myself from the brand. And then I think really when I went into floristry is when I fully like surrendered and was like, no, I think I'm Make Lemonade. And instead of being like Make Lemonade's the business, I'm Rachel Kelly. I mean, that still is a thing, but fully surrendering and just being like, this brand is an expression of me. I think that really helped me. But so like a lot of like the emotional pulls has always been a big challenge.
Yeah, no, that's something I truly get in my core.
Yeah.
But just curious, like, you know, when pandemic started, you had to switch your business model to online and create visibility. Like, especially in that like uncertain time, like creating an environment where people feel comfortable in a community setting is definitely a unique skill. So like, how did you manage to cultivate that atmosphere that encourage openness and authenticity? Because time was quite challenging for all of us. Like, so how were you able to do that? Like, what's that, you know?
I think I have to be honest and say, like, I think like the skills to cultivate a community were not things that I read in books, but things that I felt and observed and learned from, I guess, my experience of figuring it out as I go, like throughout my entire career. I've worked in the service industry, and I think I always just kind of would ask the question, like, what do people need right now? And I know that it's like, if I match people where they're at and share, like, I can't expect someone else to be authentic and vulnerable if I'm not going to be authentic and vulnerable. You know, with, of course, still being professional as well. Professionalism like has always been something that's very important to me. You know, as quirky and fun and cool and unique as I can be, at the end of the day, like, I'm still a business owner. I still have my own boundaries. And so I think, like, you know, meeting people with like that respect is some of the keys to creating a community. But some of it is like just like honing in on some of your special traits. And for me, when I was starting Make Lemonade, I was like less than 6 months in, and somebody said to me, you know, you're building a community. And I didn't know that when I was first starting Make Lemonade. I was like, I'm just creating a cool office with, you know, colorful walls and, you know, good Wi-Fi. That's it. So sometimes it's like, the side effect is the community. I think maybe that's what it is. Instead of going, I want to create a community, this is exactly what is important to me. I think it's more about doing all these other great things. And I don't mean like painting walls is what it is, but like having this attention to detail and like intention with everything you do. Like, I think sometimes the community is the side effect that ends up being this like cherry on top that you can't properly replicate in other places. It has to come organically.
That's so true, because like the other day I was having this conversation, and we were just talking about like how you keep doing you, and if your intentions and your heart is clear, everything is gonna fall in line. Like, it's just gonna like what's meant to happen will happen.
Exactly. And I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I think at the end of the day, that really is the lesson. Like, keep doing you, things will fall in place.
Switching a bit of gears, now I want to talk about flowers. Your transition into floral industry is intriguing. Like, what sparked your interest in becoming a florist? And like, how do you go about breaking into the industry? Like, because opening a co-working space and like floristry, very two different business models. Like, how did that happen?
So yeah, like it really was in 2021. It was around the same time that I was closing the space. Article in Toronto Life about a woman who left her corporate banking job. And I was just intrigued by it. And I was kind of like, huh, that sounds so cool. And I think at that point in my life, I was just like craving something that was not digital. I had this like original when I first started Make Lemonade, I had this intention of being like, I don't want my job, my career to depend on a laptop. And then what had happened is, I opened the space, it was amazing. But then with the pandemic and, switching to this online co-working model, I was on my laptop like all the time. So there was something to me that was just so intriguing about using my hands and being creative and get to play with flowers. And so when I started taking a couple workshops, went to Toronto Flower School, I didn't it was like my mind was blown with how accessible this industry could be. And then with having a community who was already supporting like my vision, I was like, I think this is what I need to do. I have an arts background. I've always I went to school. I have a fine arts degree. So I always like had this connection to the arts. And my thing that I kind of realized throughout floristry was that I was like, I just don't think I had found my medium. And flowers are this way for me to be able to play and paint, if you will. But if I'm being honest, I think that flowers are kind of like my entry point into a creative career. But I think that I'm still at the beginning of like my full spectrum of creativity.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So flower is your medium of art, like how. But like, when you were entering into this new space, I kind of want to like dig deep. Did you have any imposter syndrome or like doubts? Like, does it, as an entrepreneur, like how did you go about it?
Imposter syndrome was super real. Like I was just like, who am I? What am I doing? But I think like I would start to sign these contracts. And I mean, I got some confidence with like when my community members would sign, like would be like, I want you to do my event or whatever. I was like, okay, well, they believe in me and they haven't even seen my work yet. So I kept trying to be like, I keep reminding myself. And I mean, imposter syndrome is something that still bothers me, to this day. I keep trying to remind myself, it's like, we don't need to compare ourselves to someone who's had 10, 20, 30, 40 years of experience in this industry. We just need to compare ourselves with who I am, where I am now. Like I had a florist who told me, she's like, look at where you were a year from now. And now like the contracts that you're signing now, like you couldn't have even imagined that. So we have to like just recognize the things that we've done in our own world instead of worrying about everybody else. And then the other great thing about floristry is that freelancing is like a huge industry. So a lot of florists will hire other freelancers just for, let's say, 5 hours over a week or like a couple days, 5 hours each kind of thing to work on a project. So I was doing a lot of freelancing in the first year of starting floristry. To learn from other florists, to be able to chat and whatnot, like that really helped me grow my confidence with my invoicing, the way to do a certain project. That also really helped me.
And to follow up, like any networking tip that you have for someone who's just entering any industry, like any new space, like what's one thing that has always helped you?
I think the key for me for networking is to not go, I'm going to go to a networking event and I'm going to meet people. I think organic networking works a lot better when that's not your goal to go, I'm going to make 5 new business contacts. It's more about, I'm going to sign up for this cool event. Hopefully I meet somebody. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, entrepreneurs wine night or whatever it may be. It can just be a random event. And I think, and that's something that I've learned like throughout my career is just like, be a nice person, like ask other people questions and, like in the most genuine way possible, like tell someone about what you do. give them your business card if they ask. But like, I don't think we need to overcomplicate like how networking can be. I think like the best kind of networking comes from organic connections. And like, be genuine, be nice, and people will talk about you without you even having to ask them to.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Because I feel like networking, that word is just icky in its own way sometimes. Because like, especially when you're in business school, like it's all about networking, then like going to this event, that event. I'm like, I understand, but it's interesting to know your perspective and understand your perspective because you've been in business for like 6 years now. When you like running a business, like without losing yourself, like how do you strike that balance between business demands and staying true to your authentic self?
Advice I try to give myself too is, sometimes we got to do stuff to pay the rent. We have to eat. But, if we can be carving out time to, create a list of expectations that we hopefully can follow, to carve out time to still follow our own creative process, to put out like, this is the kind of energy, this is the kind of work that I want to attract.
Yeah.
But I think like, being able to take time to like just like rest, like to do other things outside of your work. That is where a lot of the great ideas come from too. It allows you to reset and not be so immersed in whatever you have right in front of you.
So just find different kind of hobbies or things that just brings joy to you.
Yeah.
And what brings you joy, Rachel?
That's a great question. Honestly, like right now, I do love this season, like how crunchy the leaves are. Like I love I love right now at like 4:00, like the sun is setting and it's like properly golden and the leaves are super crunchy. And like I really enjoy being able to like sneak out, grab a cup of tea or something like that. And like just like step away from everything else that I'm doing. That is stuff that brings me joy.
No, that makes sense. I've been following your journey, like, so I realize like you are very multi-passionate. So like I was reading that you love motorcycle, you have a license. So like in the sense, like how did you manage to transition, like as exciting it sounds, like because the truth is at the end we're humans and we cannot live in that one box. So like how did you manage to transition, like when you're known for that one thing, but then moving to another, like, did you find it challenging when other people talk? Like, how did you feel?
Yeah. When I first started floristry, like, I was like, this is wild. Like, this does not make sense whatsoever. I'm so nervous about, presenting myself that way. But like, it was like, I put my hand in my heart because it really was like something where I was like, I can't continue to go on like this, like in a saying like this is all I'm doing. Like I have something else that I need to share as well. And so yeah, like that for me, it was like I just need to be honest about it. And kind of like, what we said before, it's like, if you're honest about where you're at, like things will fall into place the way they're supposed to.
No.
This actually reminds me of like a little thing in floristry that I learned with designing. When you're putting, like when you have an arrangement and you're trying to get a flower to go exactly where you want it to go. And if it doesn't go and it's like, it's just struggling to sit exactly the way you want it to, the reason is that it's not supposed to be there. And I think that's like a, perfect life lesson of like, sometimes we need to stop forcing things and understand like if it's not working, maybe it's not meant to.
I love that. It's something to think about. And like, you've been an entrepreneur for the past 6 years. Like you've been running a business. So like, how did you manage to streamline your goals? Because I feel like when you're starting something, there's just so much, like so many ideas. Like, so how did you manage to streamline those goals? Like what's your sort of advice there?
It's interesting. Like when I had like the online or like the co-working business and, I would do little classes or whatnot, like I had more of a formula. And now I like a great example of like how I streamline my goals now is like from like, it's different than what it was before. But my example right now in the floristry world is like, I wrote out a little list of goals that I wanted to accomplish. by the end of this calendar year. And it was like, I want to do 10 corporate gigs. I want to do 10 weddings. I want to get 100 Google reviews. I want to lead 3 workshops, like, you know, that kind of thing. And it's like I just wrote it on a sticky note and just left it. It was like I didn't have a plan of like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to reach out to X amount of people and blah, 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 blah. I just know that's my goal. And it was like halfway through the year, I was like, oh my gosh, like I've reached these. Like I'm basically there. There's a few things like, okay, maybe it didn't exactly happen the way I expected, but that's me. I know that every single person is made up a little bit differently and everybody's process is a little bit different. And obviously, running a floral business from my home, I don't have a flower shop. I don't have employees. Like my overhead is a lot lower than another florist. And my goals and my process of getting there is not going to directly translate to someone else in a different industry. And even that wouldn't have worked like with the way I was running my co-working business either. So like that's the advice that works for me.
Yeah.
But I know that it's, you know, take that with a grain of salt for your own goals too.
And to kind of end things with, let's not talk about business for a second. I want to know your book recommendation. Like which book you're reading right now and what podcast that you love.
I have 2 book recommendations. One from last year, one from this year. Last year, I read Lessons in Chemistry. It was my favorite book of the entire year. It's a TV series now. It's incredible. I highly recommend it. And then this year, my favorite book read so far has been The Girl Behind the Wall. It's about 2 twins caught on opposite sides of the Berlin Wall just as it's going up. And it's incredible. And I guess I would like to know that like both my favorite reads are not entrepreneurial books. I learned a long time ago that like self-help, life advice, business advice, like growth books, they're not for me. I love a story. I love fiction. And I personally think that like you can learn so much from fiction anyways. And for me, it's also another way to escape and, you know, just enjoy something else outside of my business. And podcasts that I love. One of my favorite podcasts is called Science Versus. I think the hosts are really fun and I always just learn so much.
It's interesting you say that because, you know, how we always talk about business and like all these books that are out there. So like, since you told me like your degree was in fine arts, so like how was it like for you? Business always like innate? You want to start a business and not a job? Like, how did you figure that out?
My parents were entrepreneurs, so they had their own business. It was an automotive manufacturing factory, and they employed over 100 people. So I've always grown up in that world of like self-starterness, you know, kind of being in control of your own thing and like creating something out of nothing, if you will. So I've always just had that in the back of my mind.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Monica. It was so good to share with you.
Thank you so much for being here and answering all my questions. Just being honest about it. You know what? That's what I truly love.
Yeah.
When we can just sit down and just be honest about like where we are. Our journey is perfect, and that's what makes it perfect.
Oh, thank you so much.